welcome to Cybertopia cast interviews. Tonight we're talking to Aidan, who played Cyan in Cybertopia Season 1. Aidan, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a bit about Cyan.
Hi, my name's Aidan. I have been role-playing off and on for a long time. For Cyan, because Cybertopia is a dark comedy about corporate overstretch, to put it mildly.
That's a pretty good description, actually. Yeah, I've never heard it described that way, but that's pretty good.
I wanted to really buy into that, take advantage of this unique opportunity. So Cyan is someone who's clearly been modeled in horrendous ways, but is very happy about it. He very much likes his idea that he is a omnivore who essentially is like a TV tracker, but will do it for anything. And I kind of took it to extremes in the where he was basically narrating the actions of the people around him as if they were lemmings on a wildlife show. And that was kind of the angle where I was going to go. I kind of wanted this prize moment where he would be kind of like visibly talking to camera one day, but then just casually eat something that should never be eaten.
Yeah. So you were in Greenhouse of Error, and then you were in Sign of the Times, and then of course the finale. And that moment in Sign of the Times where you go to the bowling alley bar and you get like a jug of beer or something, and you eat the jug as well as drinking the beer, just in a one-er. That always sticks in my mind as being a key moment for Cyan.
Yeah. Well, I think I wanted to read the bomb at the end, and you had to say, no, that's not going to work.
I think you might have been able to, but I don't think you quite rolled well enough, maybe, or something. Oh, we're going back some. But yeah, Cyan had some adventures, that's for sure. And very interesting character, completely different to all of the other characters. Kind of a Steve Irwin-y kind of vibe to him, but also just very wacky, right?
Yeah, he was kind of meant to be creepy, and he spoke in a voice which didn't match his physique. He spoke in a high voice like this.
That was it. Yep.
And curiously, I was listening to recordings, like I couldn't work out who I was in my normal voice, but then I heard that voice. It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Very distinctive. So did you personally have any favourite moments for Cyan?
I think for me, a lot of his story was trying to change his equipment around to get the tone right. I think I started off rather kind of sedate. And then I think in the finale, I really wanted to up the eating things. I felt he hadn't eaten enough as part of dice rolling like mechanisms. So that's when I brought in the freedom source.
Oh yeah, the freedom source, which then turned out to be pretty key because you were able to kind of collaborate with Rev's character, Julie, to make the nerve gas essentially that got put into the ventilation system, and that had a pretty profound effect on another group. And actually I was saying this to someone else on one of the other interviews, the groups in the finale were never really intended to interact with each other, but there was a couple of moments in that session that you guys did where you had an impact on the other group that was going into the building, and it was totally unexpected and something that I had then to try and weave together quite smartly, and it really actually worked really nicely and brought your team more into the fold on it all, because I suppose you were the outside team. You didn't really get your fingers in that deep and dirty on it, just taking out the outside guard really and putting down the jamming device. But those were a couple of really good moments, I think, overall for the whole finale that brought stuff together.
Yeah, I was very pleased, because I think the thing about Cybertopia is you don't really understand how your equipment and skills are going to work until you start using them. Because I think a lot of characters had aspects of their character could work in all sorts of circumstances and they could bring them into play, and I found I didn't really have that flexibility. It's fine. I mean, Cyan was a character rather than, someone who was particularly effective in every circumstance.
And I think that was a really good example of how the system works, in that it doesn't matter, right? Like, you don't have to have tools and skills that apply. You can still attempt things and still try and do things. And you were a key example of that, where you would just try and do things and you'd go off piece and you'd try and do something wacky or whatever that you wouldn't have expected someone else to do. But you just go and kind of experiment and try things out, even though, you're an expert hunter and it's not really a hunting kind of thing, but we'll try it anyway.
Yes, I'm used to one-page games or one-shots where essentially, you kind of want people to go off rails and do crazy things because that's where the fun and drama lies. And it was fun trying to balance that need to create weirdness and drama without derailing the whole thing so much that you couldn't finish the episode.
Yeah. I suppose that side of things was a little bit difficult in season 1 because they were very contained missions. You were sent to a specific place with a specific goal. There wasn't really an outside world beyond the location that you were sent to. In season 2, I plan for that to completely change, and you're going to be going out into the open world and making your own path and deciding where you want to go and who you want to interact with and stuff yourself. But in season 1, you're tied down to your specific missions. And yeah, I think because of the particular way that you'd set up Cyan, they weren't really suited to the environments a lot of the time. Actually, I don't know. In the greenhouse mission, I mean, it was all kind of wild and naturey and stuff, so that kind of applied, but I think your whole thing of being a hunter never really got to come into play. Like, if there'd been some, I don't know, like chase scenes or something, that might have been something that would have been really good for Cyan, but we never really came into that. And so it always felt like they were the kind of character that was waiting for their moment.
Yes. But it's fine, you make things fun with what you have.
Yeah, and I mean, you certainly did that. In the greenhouse mission in particular, that was wild. That was such a wild ride. Like, I've never seen dice go like they did in that. There must have been about 14 crits or something either way between the nat 1s and the nat 20s all over the shop. But also the group makeup in that mission was really interesting because honestly, you're kind of a wild card character, and particularly with the eating thing, and you're sent into a greenhouse that's full of food.
Oh man!
And the whole time you're like, "Can I eat this? Can I eat this?" And Rev, playing Julie, who was very much a company person, they're like, "No, you can't eat that. That's company property." And it was the first session that I'd had with you guys, and the first time you'd played together and stuff. And there was definitely some character tension there, which was really good to see. But it was also the first time in the whole season that there'd been any sort of conflict between characters, and so that was a really interesting moment to try and balance that and to make sure that it didn't derail the story so much that, like I said, that the episode wouldn't be finished and that the story could still roll. And it worked out quite nicely in the end. But I remember at the time when I was editing it, it was quite difficult to manage the flow, I think, and to get the timings right. It was a very different experience from the other episodes where it all just kind of barrels forward and keeps on going. And I think particularly in the middle of Greenhouse of Era, you all kind of almost felt a little bit stuck. You kind of went back to the computer in the hub bit and we're trying to figure out, what do we do next? And then you all went off in separate directions at one point.
I remember that.
Yeah, so you all went off in separate directions at one point. And it's not really a problem in Cybertopia to split the party. It's not that sort of thing where, oh no, we can't handle having everyone off in different places or they're all going to die because they're on their own sort of thing. But then it all came back together and you figured out a way forwards and found the next step in the mission, and then the shit really hit the fan.
I think the fun thing about Greenhouse of Era was none of us were the right people to go on that mission.
Yeah. Yep.
Essentially, although it's a greenhouse, it all rolled around computers and none of us were good at computers.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kept looking for other things that might be relevant that were kind of in character for us to care about. And sadly, there were no, at that point, there were no policing plants to deal with.
Yeah, that got really interesting. But I think there was someone that was supposed to be on that mission that had to drop out last minute who was going to be a hacker. And so they would have been a key person.
Yes.
And then that didn't end up happening. But yeah, the ramshackle thrown together security team kind of thing that your group was just made for a really fun story. And when the man-eating plants came out and started their thing and the roles went all over the place, some of you were falling over and some of you were just zipping off into the distance. And one of my favorite Cyan moments came from that, where you got right up first out of everyone to the first plant and could see the person inside it kind of getting devoured and just went into documentarian mode.
Yes.
Watching and documenting it and be like, oh, this is super interesting.
He is such a dark character because he's just got no sense of that's wrong.
No, that's definitely one of my favorite Cyan moments. Do you have any specific moment of your own that you're like, nailed that? Or like, was there any particular moment where it was really allowed Cyan to shine in your eyes?
I think he really did his best in the finale. Mm-hmm. But I go back to the commentary, which I self-censored in the end. I really like that. And I think for people listening, it was a bit too dark.
And I'm trying to think back because, yeah, like I think I did cut a lot of it out of the recordings. Oh man, we're going back some.
But yeah, there's basically doing a vox pop.
Yeah, I remember the conversations during the sessions now, actually. And I think it also didn't quite fit the theme of being a secret ops kind of group as well. So I think that was one of the reasons why I cut some of that stuff out. But it was also like an interesting idea of having someone that was documenting what you were doing and what you were going through during the missions, even if it wasn't going to go out to the public or anything. Maybe that would be videos that would go back to HR or for security training purposes or something back at HQ. So I think there was some really interesting themes that came out of Cyan, even if they didn't actually go down onto the recording in the end. But no, I think they definitely had some really good moments of their own. I often also think about how basically you save the day in Signs of the Times when everyone's trying to talk to the kids at the hover hockey park. And they're all flailing horribly. And I can't remember. I think it might have been either Jen or Mark that rolled a nat 1 trying to talk to the kids. And they were not getting anywhere. Jen was trying to offer them blood orange. And the T-Robot was just getting nowhere with them.
I was very impressed the T-Robot failed.
That was great. Because talking to people was his whole thing, really, right?
Yes.
And then you just come along and show them the drone that was like one of your key things. And they're one of the things that I have pre-written for the kids was that they are really fucking interested in tech. So as soon as you bring out a drone, they're like, wow, and they're all over it. So that really worked out because that scene was one of the few moments in the whole season, I think, where the DICE just didn't want the group to continue and you were all really stuck. And I thought at one point, oh God, they're just going to have to walk away because they're not going to get anywhere with this and they're just going to have to try and find something else to go and look at, which would have been perfectly fine. You could have done that, but it would have been a shame to have lost that scene to zero progress. And then you come along and you do your thing, and it was the Hail Mary last ditch attempt at trying to win these kids over, and it completely worked. And then at the very end of that episode, you were like, I'm going to leave the kids the drone. And that was real nice.
Well, it was, except, it's just corporate.
Yeah.
It came out of the PR budget, essentially.
Yeah. And I think that was a big thing for Cyan of being like, they don't really have loyalty to Amazing Corp. They're just doing their thing and happen to be employed by Amazing Corp.
Well, I think the loyalty is there simply because no one else would let him do what he does.
Mm-hmm.
Who else would employ someone who's jaw distended in horrible ways?
So this is never something that we've really discussed, but the jaw distending thing, is that something that Cyan got through Amazing Corp, or did they get it before they joined and it just happened to be something that they have?
No, it was definitely Amazing Corp.
Yeah.
They basically custom designed him for something.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's exactly what he's doing now, but they custom designed him and he was very happy with the modification, despite the fact that it's horrible.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, this gives me ideas. Because, there's definitely like the R&D section of Amazing Corp that would be doing weird shit for very specific and secret purposes that don't make any sense to anybody else but them.
Yes, and sometimes they are real purposes and sometimes they are, we got some money to spend. Would be fun if we could...
It's the end of year budget. Can we turn someone into a human snake?
I mean, the idea of that particular element came from Sluggy Freelance. There is a demon there called Nor. There's more consonants than 4 in that word, but they're very hard to pronounce with human tongues.
Yeah, of course.
Literally, their head opens in 2 in order to bite things.
Okay.
And that's the angle I came from, because I thought that'd be really weird and disturbing.
Yeah, I think if and when I ever get to doing some character art for this show, Cyan is going to be a very interesting challenge to the artist.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I aim for.
We mentioned earlier about the eating the bomb in the finale, and that was also a great moment in my eyes for Cyan.
Yeah.
Especially because they had that conflict with Julie in the first episode that you were in. For you two to get grouped again in the finale, and that moment where you've got the bomb in your mouth, everyone realizes it's a bomb, and Julie jumps into action, is like, yeah, this is my friend, I'm gonna save my friend.
Aww.
And then rolled a nat 20 or rolled really high or something to do it, and that was like one of these coming together moments. And
Well,
yeah, that was real nice.
that is still my highlight, I think, because it was a group effort, but done really well.
Yeah, but also how that started, that whole moment where everyone's trying to take down the drone in the sky as it's flying towards you, and everyone's failing again. And then you leap into action with your mouth wide open. I've always got this image in my head of this like massive open mouth just going towards this drone, which I imagine would have been fairly big as well, which is why you couldn't quite get it all the way in your mouth. But just this massive mouth flying towards this flying drone. Just a hilarious image. Yeah, very good shit.
Yeah, I have no regrets about Cyan. Yeah, no regrets whatsoever.
I can't wait to see how they're going to develop in season 2. They are such a particular character, right? And like I said, very different from all of the others. Now they're out in the open world. What do you think they're going to do?
Well, it's very interesting because we talked a little bit after the recording finished on our finale session, which we know was the first of the 4 finales.
Yeah, I think it was the first one I recorded, yeah.
So I seem to be doing a lot of firsts for this series.
Yeah, true.
So we talked about it because it was like there was kind of an assumption that we'd be against Amazing Corps.
Yeah.
And Cyan's like, no, they may fall, they may keel over, but there'll always be an Amazing Corps and I'll always work for them.
Oh, interesting.
I think I may be one of the few characters who think that.
Not the only one, but yeah, you're definitely in a minority there.
Because I think, there's lots of reasons for it, but I can see lots of people going for the arc of stuff. It's like, no, let's double down on this now. This is the moment to double down and kind of go, let's rebuild Agents of Amazing Corps.
So Cyan wouldn't feel betrayed from being blown up by Amazing Corps?
No, there's bound to be a reason.
Right. Do you think they'd want to try and find out that reason? What would be their immediate reaction to all of this?
I need to go back and kind of make sure I get back on the air. Honestly, he's not the most thoughtful character. So I think he's very much, if he's broken, Amazing Corps can rebuild him.
Yeah, but Amazing Corps don't want him anymore. They tried to kill you.
Did they say that they don't want him? Are they cancelling his shows?
I mean, they blew him up, right?
But they're not cancelling his shows, so clearly they still want the shows.
Okay. What if they did cancel his shows? What if they...
Oh, no, if they cancel his shows, then he might really start getting pissed off.
I wonder if Cyan would try to go freelance or try to start their own pirate channel or something.
I can see him having a pirate channel which demonstrates his bid to get his show back on the air again by nibbling on various executives until they realise how important he is.
I suppose that's another angle of it all, right? Because there was several changes in management as the season went on, and there may or may not have been specific people who directed the dissolution of Tabula Rasa and your team. So maybe there'd be specific people that you might want to try and track down or find to work your way back in. Maybe try and reform Amazing Corp or something.
Well, more importantly, there will be people who will pay him to do that because they also want back in, unless they've all been killed.
Like you said, there's always going to be Amazing Corp in some form or another. They are the world's largest corporation. They run, at least in this city, basically everything. There are other factions and other organizations that exist, but Amazing Corp is the big one and will always be, despite anything that would happen during all of this. So there'd be probably different factions within Amazing Corp that you could maybe try and get involved with or try and work your way back into and use to influence Amazing Corp or change the direction that they're going in and maybe turn them into a more media-focused empire rather than the power and control thing that they seem to have got going on.
Yeah. I struggle to think of him as a politician, but he is definitely exactly the kind of person that ambitious people would use to enact their plans. He is a bit like pointing a bullet and saying, get him.
Do you think he'd be the kind of person that would be malleable enough to get recruited into a anti-Amazing Corp faction and used for nefarious purposes?
Only if they didn't tell him they were anti-Amazing Corp.
Okay.
Or they promised him it's the right thing to, if they promised him that they would let him back into Amazing Corp once they've destabilized it in the right way.
Yeah, if they were like, we're going to take over Amazing Corp or something like that. Okay. Yeah, I can see some interesting routes for this. That's cool. Okay. Yeah, I get you. Are there any loose ends or anything like that that you'd like to follow up yourself in season 2?
Not really, because I don't think Cyan understood what was going on. I'm not sure Aidan really understood what was going on.
Are there any characters or locations you'd like to revisit, you think, or anyone that you'd like to interact with again?
Honestly, the world of overreached cyber corporation has so much potential that I really just like where we go with it. I think it's one of those ones where if you said, I need new ideas, I could probably generate a list of 10 crazy ideas really easily.
I think you're going to get plenty of opportunity to do that in season 2 because, like I said, it's going to be a lot more open world. Essentially, I'm aiming to have it be completely player-led. So when you get going, you'll be deciding your own routes and your own paths and inserting your own thoughts into the world of what exists there. And we're also doing a faction/city building game where you and the other players will collaborate to create your own factions that will have places in the world and have their own identities and aims and NPCs and things like that. So you're going to have the opportunity to make your own mark on this world beyond the loose notes that I've put down in season 1. So yeah, there'll be lots of chance for you to do that.
I mean, that sounds great. I actually can't wait for those.
Did you have any favorite characters to play with, or from other episodes that you've listened to, any that you wish you'd gotten the chance to play with?
I really liked the group we had in the finale.
Yeah. So you had Julie, the mad scientist. You had Nox, who was kind of a suave hacker type. And you had Subject 5, who was a mutant lizard person. So I feel there would have been some sort of instant kinship there with the lizard person and you being kind of a snaky kind of person, although without the reptilian nature. That was a good group. And yeah, a lot of good moments in that session for sure.
And I think the one which also stood out for me, because there were some really, really amazing characters who I kind of like, I felt, wow, that's so much more interesting than my character. And in retrospect, I think I'm happy with what happened. It's like, these guys are pretty cool. And I think, like, the T person.
Yeah. Sir Ingram of Flash Knuckle, yes. From the other ones that you've listened to, was there any characters that you didn't play with that you'd really like to?
I'm not sure how many characters I didn't play with. So I think
you did play with quite a lot of different people, actually. A lot of the other players played with the same people multiple times, but for you, I think the only person you played with a second time was Rev. But yeah, you had a lot of breadth in yours. I think one character that might be a good fit for being around Cyan could be Jeff's character, Tim's. His whole thing is he's like a media personality. And in Tower of Darkness, he was being like a cameraman going through the Blair Witchy sort of vibe of that. And I think that could be a really cool combo if you two teamed up and he was being like the cameraman for Cyan doing their whole huntery thing. That could be cool. I think they would have been a really good fit. And that could be, especially in the open world where you could be like an urban hunter type or whatever, having someone like that follow you around as being your cameraman and documentarian following you. That could be cool. And I don't know, I've got this image of a streamer that is doing the whole GoPro kind of thing, scaling buildings and chasing down their targets and whatnot across the urban landscape.
I'm just thinking it'd be really cool to do a documentary on the fall of Amazing Core, where we hunt down in all former executives on the run to interview them.
Interview in inverted commas here, or?
Well, no, I mean, I can't say that necessarily the end of the interview will necessarily be finale of the story, but technically speaking, it's to interview. I think the trouble is executives can be very tricky sorts.
Yeah.
Don't always like to play ball, and that could lead to some interesting moments.
Sure. Yeah. Every time I've done one of these interviews, it's resulted in me coming up with a lot of ideas. And yeah, I've definitely got some thoughts of how stuff could potentially go for Cyan in season 2. Of course, this all depends on how you and your group end up going as well. My plan for season 2 for you as a player is that rather than have you jumping between groups and just doing a couple of sessions here and there, I'd like to do a more solid run of like 4 to 6 sessions with the same group or more or less the same group, where you really get to define a character arc and build some relationships and stuff like that. So it'll be really interesting to see how Cyan evolves in that process and within a group and stuff.
Yes. The thing is, he's not evolving because nothing's been changing for him, really. And so maybe this will do it. But equally, I think from my point of view as a player, you said what was going on, and I said I didn't really know what was going on. And I think for me as a player, I would love to do this kind of documentary to actually have an idea about what on earth was happening under the hood.
Yeah, well, so from a player and a character's perspective, as trying to understand the whole situation.
Yes. And it's not like there wouldn't be drama in it. But, just some thoughts riffing off the top of my head. And I think you and I both know that we both can generate story hooks all over the place. It's just a matter of choosing which ones rather than knowing where we begin.
Yeah, and I think that'll be one of the things with the going into the open world and having full player agency, narrowing down and deciding and collaborating with the others in the group to decide where you want to focus or like what lines you want to go down first. So there's going to be a lot of intrigue around there, I think. So essentially, you've been abandoned by Amazing Corp at this point, thrown under the bus. You're not going to have access to all of the same extent of gear. You're not going to be able to just replace your drone camera again and stuff like that. With that reduced set of resources, what would be the key things that you'd want to keep for Cyan? I'm assuming you're always going to have the distended jaw thing. That is something that is kind of wired into your character as a thing. And I guess the camera drone is a pretty key feature, right, as well?
At the end of the day, he is someone who could largely operate without equipment. So it depends what his goal is. I mean, I think if he wants to record stuff, yes, he should have the camera. And I really love that idea, whatever he's doing. It's always fun coming up with weird things to do with the camera that were actually really quite useful. So the last thing he had was his camo bodysuit, which never really did very much because he was never hiding very much. He had a fan base, or a peculiar fan base. He had the Freedom Source and the drone camera. I really love the Freedom Source, but that probably is the first thing that's going to run out because he can't replace it. So at one point he had deadly saliva, and that never got used, really. That's why I moved on.
I think for every character in season 1, because you have so many options and so many points that you could put into your gear and your skills and stuff, everyone on every episode had something that they didn't use or just didn't apply to the situation. And that happened quite a few times where we got to the end of the session and someone was like, oh yeah, I didn't use that for anything. And that happened to everyone. So it's a common thing, but I think with the reduced points in season 2, you're going to be a lot more focused, at least initially. I suppose, did you get any learnt skills from season 1? I can't remember.
So I did. I got analysis, observation, and feats of strength.
Yeah. So that stuff will stay with you because learned stuff is permanent.
Yes.
You'll lose some of the downloadable skills that you would have gotten from Amazing Corp chips and stuff. But I think having a more limited range is going to focus you into probably, I guess, the more huntery aspects of the character. So you're going to be using stuff from your sheet every time because that's all you've got.
Yes. I think one thing I would really like to keep, because I haven't used it that much, but I really want to keep it if he's going off, is the peculiar fan base. Because if you don't have a support network, the number of ways you can tap fans to help you.
I wonder if this is part of your arc. Like, if you were to lose that peculiar fan base, you could get it back. Like, that's going to be a big part, I think, of season 2 is re-establishing yourselves as characters, as people in this world, and regaining the things that you've lost, whether it's equipment or a fan base. And maybe if you were to go down this road with Tim's of putting on your own show, you could use that as a way to regain your peculiar fan base, who could then assist you in whatever purposes they might come in handy, you know?
Yes. Yeah, I can see that. It's be interesting to see, really.
Yeah. I'd struggled to think of where you might end up going with Cyan in season 2, but I really feel like there's a picture coming together here of a potential that you could go down. So yeah, for sure. So we've talked a bunch about Cybertopia and Cyan and stuff. Why don't you tell us a bit about what you do outside of Cybertopia?
Well, I have some projects in my head, but they're not going anywhere. I haven't really been able to do any game design for about 6 or 9 months because for various reasons. I do have all my existing games at pix-at-flies.itch.io, and lots of people may already have those. They are all one-shot games because I really like comedy one-shots.
Yeah. What sort of stuff you got in there?
So the one I'm going to print off a few copies to distribute around Games Expo is called Spaceship Horizon. Spaceship Horizon was written because I wanted to take a game to an online convention, and the theme was Horizon. And I didn't have a game that suited what I wanted to do at the time. So I just wrote one.
Cool.
And it is based on the same idea as Gosford Park. That is, you are all elite people of one degree or another. You are essentially the upper class in a world where the lower class is essentially robots.
Okay.
And I apologise. I should give a spoiler alert. I mean, Gosford Park has been out 20 years.
I was going to say, I've never seen it. But is that what Gosford Park is?
It is a murder mystery where the murder mystery is secondary to everything else.
Okay. Yeah, I remember the trailers for it or something and thinking it was some sort of period drama something. Right.
So it is, for those who watched Downton Abbey, Downton Abbey was created because the writer did Gosford Park first.
Oh.
And then people said we could do a series based on this, but, maybe make it serious and drop the murder aspect. Because essentially, he writes very good, like 1920s, 1930s period dramas.
Uh-huh.
So it is a period drama, but there's a moment where someone asks a policeman, are you going to interview the servants? And he goes, of course not. Why would I interview those? What have they got to do with it? And so it's based on the idea that you're in a situation where the only humans on board are the player characters.
Right.
There's been a murder kind of committed just before the game begins. So clearly one of you did, except absolutely one of the robots did it.
Yeah.
But you're in a society where you would never consider that robots were capable of murder.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you will never consider it. And so the comedy comes from essentially being idiots who they're not used to doing anything themselves because robots always do it for them.
Right, yeah.
Fumbling around, trying to blame each other, dig up all the dirt, and do some very dubious investigating.
So is this using a system of your own, or is it using another system or anything?
So I did write a system for it. It was diceless, but essentially every time you cause trouble for another character, you got a point which enabled you to do something.
Okay.
And then I played it a few times and realised that was never used, that players are more than capable of causing problems without any mechanical bribes.
I see.
And so the rules is basically now just assume you're terrible at what you're doing. It doesn't necessarily mean you fail.
Yeah.
It just means that whatever you do will cause more problems for someone.
This sounds chaotic and fun.
As long as everyone is planning to cause problems and goes into it on that basis, you'll all have a whale of a time.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And then the second game I designed, which I also need to revamp, was called The Horror Trap, which was a reverse Wicker Man, where you're playing the villagers trying to lure someone in and make sure that you sacrifice them in the most specific way.
Oh my god.
Possible.
That's an awesome idea.
And you also have rubbish powers like hindsight. And that does have a rule system, but I actually can't remember what it is.
Anything where there's mention of rubbish powers instantly draws me in. You can probably tell from the way Cybertopia works that I'm very much a fan of abstract kind of skill sets and abstract abilities. So that sounds fun.
Yes, I playtested all my early games, and that one did playtest very well.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the later ones I didn't so much.
Yeah.
There comes a point where it doesn't matter. You know that whatever you're doing is going to be close work, and that because it's a one-shot, people just figure out there's like weird things here and there. People just figure it out on the spur.
One shots and relatively rules light games definitely are a lot easier on that front. And yeah, if you're a bit looser with the construction of the rules, then it doesn't really matter about things like balance and that sort of stuff, right?
Absolutely not. Because at the end of the day, you just want everyone to have the opportunity to cause problems.
Mm-hmm. So have you got any future projects that you've got planned for later this year or anything like that?
Well, the two things in my head. One is I've been trying to work on a fantasy, possibly high fantasy system where combat is narrative rather than turn-based.
Okay.
Which is quite difficult to pull off. And I kind of know how it works. And the idea is that instead of saying, I hit someone, I move here, you say, I'm holding this bridge. I'm protecting the spellcasters.
You kind of describe your role in the moment sort of thing.
Yeah, essentially you're not doing a beat by beat combat.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing it kind of phase by phase.
I see.
In theory, it's all simultaneous, not quite, but it kind of combines the dice rolling and basic mechanics from the John Wick game House of the Blooded with the feats from Age, or the idea of them, along with kind of like a bunch of other ideas, and then obviously my own direction on it. I think the problem I have with it is I've got the system roughly in my head, but when I write it out, it looks, that's tiny. Is that really enough to publish as a full-grown game system?
It sounds like something that conceptually kind of simple, but the way it's going to work in practice is going to get very complicated, I think. And so you're going to need to have a lot of guidance around how to use it, rather than it being an instruction of how the system works might be the easy part, but how to use the system will be the difficult thing, I think.
I think you're right. I think it's a elegant system, but a bit like House of the Blooded will require a lot of context to make it sing.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty certain what I want to do is persuade my Monday night group to let me playtest it with them for like a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then the rulebook will develop from that.
Yeah.
Rather than my usual way of writing it first.
It will grow arms and legs, won't it? So you said that you like these one-shots and stuff. Do you have a favourite system to play or run?
I'm a great fan of Fate because I love the fact that you're defined by who you are rather than what you can do.
Right. Yeah, because you got the aspects and stuff, right?
Yes. And it's export it because they drive you. But in order to get Fate points, you have to do something stupid that fits your aspects. So what it's essentially saying is, while you can choose what you do, you are really strongly encouraged to really play who you are and really think about that. And we came off end of last year a 3-year Dresden Files game.
Oh, cool.
Which had the characters were so deep, and I do not think, and it partly is who the players were and how I ran it, but I don't think we could have got that depth quite so easily without those aspects. Basically, really putting front and center the complexities and the drives of those characters and the personalities of those characters.
Yeah, it really pushes forward the RP and the character-driven notion of a game as opposed to mechanics first. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I know I didn't run it as written in the sense of, or as people expect to play. It's kind of meant to be a pulp game where you're constantly in action. And ideally didn't do it that way. There was lots of investigation and talking and role-playing and shopping trips. Not to buy equipment, but to buy Christmas presents.
That's not something you'd expect to hear about Dresden Files, but sure, yeah.
Well, Dresden Files is all about the characters and trying to create a semblance of life amongst horrible drama. And I haven't read that much Dresden Files, but I read enough to realise that there's never one thing.
Yeah.
So, my poor players had to cope with all sorts of short and long-term issues affecting them.
Do you generally prefer to be a GM, or do you also like being a player? Do you like a mix?
I think my problem was... Well, actually, no. I like being a GM, I prefer storyteller. In fact, I use story guide because I like my players to tell the story. So story guide is me shaping some things, but letting them tell the story.
Yeah.
I don't know why I get so fussy about it, but...
It's one of those things, and I always struggle to find a term that feels right. For Cybertopia, I use game runner rather than game master or DM or any of that sort of stuff.
I like that. But so before I did that, I got back into tabletop by playing in a different Thursday night game, which I was invited to, and I hadn't done tabletop for quite some time. And absolutely, I was fine being a player. I liked it.
Yeah.
It just so happened that one by one, our storytellers fell down to life reasons.
Yeah, that happens.
So it was me, and I hadn't done that much storytelling for the Dresden Files game. But I'd read an awful lot of advice, and I had done some and I pay attention. But I really come from a live role-playing background. And by that, I mean, so I live in Bristol, and Bristol has had a long, I don't know what you would really call, they don't have a proper term. They're things like the vampire games, where you have lots of people in a room talking to each other a lot. and then
Right.
using some kind of test system, which is then rely on your physical abilities.
Mm-hmm.
They're not pile ups, which are something quite specific, and they're not bottle ups, which are the kind of the foam sword ones. So I don't know if they have a proper term,
Okay.
but we've had loads of them over time. The first one I did in my more mature lately years was a Firefly LARP.
Okay.
That went for 2.5 years, and we've
Wow.
had Battlestar Galactica, Seventh Seas, and most of them use custom systems.
Is there a particular theme you prefer? Do you like the sci-fi stuff or the fantasy stuff? Or
I have liked all those games.
yeah, just everything.
I just like that creative spark that comes from having so many people involved. And even though your character's made posed, there's a real heart to these games where everyone is really trying to tell the best story they can, not just for themselves, but people around them as well.
Yeah, it's a lot more collaborative than competitive.
Yes.
I get you.
I have to say, I thought about running in one of those games, and the older I get, the more I think, too much work.
It feels like a lot of effort.
I imagine it's very rewarding because the players love it.
Yeah, but a hell of a lot of work.
Yes. And there's a limit to how many ways you can bribe them to say thank you.
Yeah.
If I was an artist, I think I would do art, but I'm not. So
I mean, like you say, it's a very rewarding thing running a game and having your players just have a great time, you know, like seeing that joy on people's faces as they're getting to do silly, ridiculous stuff and play out whatever fantasy that they're playing.
Yes.
Is so rewarding, and part of why I love running this podcast. And as much as I have this kind of love-hate relationship with editing, when I'm listening back to some of the episodes and I'm just cackling away at some of the stuff you lot get up to, it's so much fun listening back to the sessions that we've done and being like, oh yeah, that happened. And yeah, it is a reward in itself. So yeah, for sure. Kind of feels like we're coming to a close here. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about, or where we can find you online, social media, or any of that sort of stuff?
So if you go to my itch page, all my links are from there. So I think if I stick to that,
I'll stick it in the show notes as well so that people can just click the link instead of trying to listen to what was said earlier. But yeah.
I'm on Discord, I'm on X, but not very much.
I know what you mean. Social media is hard these days, dude. But yeah.
Honestly, if you want to get a hold of me, just ping me a message on Discord. It's probably the best way to go.
Cool. Well, it's been great chatting with you. I think we've come up with some really cool ideas around Cyan in future. One last thing before we cut off. Cyan, right? Are there accents on any of these letters? Because the way I've always written it, I've been like, it feels like there should be some accents. Is it just SE-AN?
Yes.
Okay, that's a lot easier, because every time I get to writing, I'm like, how do you write an E with the accent on again? What's the shortcut? Like, okay, don't have to worry about that. Say Anne. Nice.
Theoretically, if you're writing him according to international thing, you'd probably have an acute E.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty certain that the way I pronounce it doesn't actually match a spelling in any language.
Yeah.
So be it. He's not meant to be a real character.
No, that's fine. He is who he is, and he's Cyan, and I can't wait to see where he goes. So very excited for season 2. I
do have one thing to say before the end, which is I want to say that I have been very impressed, because when you started doing these podcasts, you were new to it all. And over time, I have seen how much you have developed in terms of recording and editing and all the other elements of it. As game designers, we know how hard it is to publicize. Basically, you have to be our own designers.
It's a lot of work.
And layout designers, sometimes artists. And then on top of that, you added all this stuff about editing, and serious credit to you that you got to this point now. And I don't see you stopping down this journey.
Yeah, I don't think I could if I wanted to. Like, it's just, there's too much here to let go. So it's been immense fun with every single one of you. And I've thoroughly enjoyed doing all these interviews and running the game and having you lot do your stuff. Yeah, no, thanks for being part of this, and thanks for chatting to me. And I look forward to us playing some more in the coming months.